Ladies and gentlemen, I have been waiting for this news for weeks now, and we've been doing coverage on this, and I've done several live streams on why I think Kash Patel will be the next Federal Bureau of Investigation Director. NPR, Trump picks longtime ally Kash Patel to replace current FBI director. NBC News, Trump nominates loyalist Kash Patel to serve as Federal Bureau of Investigation Director. CNN, Trump announces he intends to replace current director with loyalist Kash Patel. The outgoing director and the directors that he replaced were essentially loyalists of the Democratic Party. If you don't know anything about politics, that you think that Merrick Garland, and hit subscribe to this channel right now. You will hear from Kash Patel in a couple of seconds. But ladies and gentlemen, this is amazing news. The best thing you could hear pertaining to the upcoming new Trump administration. I love Kash Patel, but you'd have to be a complete imbecile to think that the Honorable Merrick Garland or the Honorable Eric Holder were not loyalists, or that they were independent, or that they were apolitical, nonpartisan. They literally were held in contempt of Congress. So anyone who calls Kash Patel or Pam Bondi or John Ratcliffe loyalists of Trump, do these same people call Eric Holder and Merrick Garland loyalists of the Democratic Party or of President Obama or President Biden? Eric Holder and Merrick Garland were literally held in contempt of Congress for withholding documents, information demanded by Congress in an official congressional request. Which I can use the word now, but it sounds like something else. So, for the first couple of minutes of the live stream, we'll just say an official congressional request. You had attorneys general within Democratic Party administrations who refused to hand over documents that could have implicated their Democratic Party affiliated, the Democrats in the Oval Office, with possible criminal behavior, or Democrats in their administrations, respective administrations, with possible criminal behavior. One, selling armament during President Obama's administration. Mr. Holder withheld evidence from congressional investigators. And the second, contempt of Congress. Merrick Garland withheld transcripts and the interview transcripts of Biden and his special counsel pertaining to numerous examples of mishandling of classified data. Trump was a president with the power to declassify. Navy versus Egan was the Supreme Court precedent, along with others, that gives the president of the United States the power to declassify anything he wants. This is absolutely huge, ladies and gentlemen, and I can't stress to you enough that you are going to have, this is the first era in American politics, or maybe in world politics, modern world politics, where the left or liberals or progressives loved intelligence agencies. They worshipped the assessments and the documents within the declarations of intel chiefs like John Brennan and James Clapper. You had good liberals saying that Trump was a Kremlin operative because people like the Honorable John Brennan and the Honorable James Clapper and all these honorable people, James Comey, Andrew McCabe, you had all of these intel chiefs saying that Trump was a Kremlin operative because a dossier purchased by Clinton and the DNC stated he was. And now you're going to have those same liberal Democrats despise the same agencies they once worshipped. Hit subscribe to this channel right now, okay? You go from Bernie Sanders. I was the biggest Bernie Sanders booster on the internet, according to the Huffington Post. I was the unofficial scribe of Sanders' most hardcore voters, according to the Washington Post. You go from Bernie Sanders to Donald Trump because you want to completely reform a very corrupt system. And I thought that Bernie Sanders would bring about record low poverty, which is what Trump did in 2019. I thought that Bernie Sanders was the anti-endless military quagmire, the anti-war choice. I thought Bernie Sanders was against endless military entanglements. That's Trump. That's how you go. Foreign policy and economic policy. If you're the left, you should love Trump, Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, John Radcliffe, because you certainly loved all the other intel chiefs, but you had record low poverty with Trump, which is everything that Bernie Sanders wanted long ago, and you had an anti-war choice, which is what Bernie Sanders was, allegedly the choice of back in the day. But see, the thing is, Bernie and then Biden were both railroaded by their own Democratic primaries. Anyway, we can go on forever. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. Paul Bartlett, thank you. To my super chat, thank you. This is amazing, amazing, amazing news. This is absolutely fantastic. Hit subscribe. Let's get started. This is Kash Patel, the new Federal Bureau of Investigation Director. And this is Devin Nunes. But Kash Patel in a second.
Looks like there were a lot of connections to the Brookings Institute. Which, for those of your viewers who don't know what this is like the prominent left-wing think tank here in our nation's capital. And we think there is a connection between the president of Brookings and those dossiers that were given to the State Department that mirrored the Steele dossiers, which, look, all of this, what does this mean? This was the Clinton campaign's dossiers. It was the dirt. It was a phony story that they sold not only to the American people, but they sold it and corrupted our FBI, where it appears like these dirty cops were more than willing to take this information and present it to the FISA court.
Yes, that was Congressman Devin Nunes on this program back in 2020, exposing direct links between the Brookings Institute and Christopher Steele's fabricated dossier, which was bought and paid for by Hillary Clinton and her campaign and the Democratic National Committee. Last week, Steele's primary subsource, Igor Danchenko, who was also an analyst at Brookings, was arrested and charged with 5 counts of lying to the FBI. The third indictment in special counsel John Durham's probe. He has since pleaded not guilty. My next guest took the depositions of several of the players who were pushing the phony Russia collusion lie. Former Pentagon Chief of Staff Kash Patel joins me right now. He, along with Devin Nunes, cracked open this case 3-4 years ago. Kash, it's good to see you this morning in a snowy Pennsylvania. Great looking shot there.
Great to be with you, Maria. Thanks.
Well, let's see if we could fix the audio for a second. Hopefully the audio is okay. But ladies and gentlemen, this is the new FBI chief. You went from Comey to McCabe to Wray to now Kash Patel. Every single intel chief was a loyalist of either the system that Democrats influenced tremendously, or just the Democratic Party. Okay. It can be said that John Brennan was very loyal to President Obama. Eric Holder, John Brennan, James Clapper, James Comey, Andrew McCabe, they were all very loyal to President Obama. They worked under President Obama. They were extremely loyal. That's not a disrespectful statement. President Obama had his administration, and his administration was extremely loyal, and they did exactly what was good for the Democratic Party and President Obama's administration. Okay, and media loved that. When President Obama, because of a news story, fired a top general, immediately media said, well, he had to do so. He had to do so. The news story came out, and President Obama had to do that. When all of these scandals and controversies within President Obama's administration came to light, and they were linked to a sale of, for example, uranium, for example, all of this was, you can't prove anything, and by the way, what he did was just fine. And all his intel chiefs were a part of it, but it was just fine, totally above board. No laws were broken. Now you're going to see the same media that worshipped intel agencies, and I've been saying this for 8 years. If you worship intel agencies, if you're on the left, just wait until the power structure changes. When the paradigm changes and you have a person who wants to reform the system, Trump can be viewed as what is called a system reformer. Okay? Those who utilized the system to go after their direct political rivals broke the law, very likely. If there's a government official that utilized the United States government to try to imprison Trump, they very likely broke the law. This is not this is the antithesis of what an authoritarian is. And by the way, anyone calling Trump an authoritarian is an absolute complete imbecile that lacks knowledge and knows absolutely nothing about history. And I don't care if leading historians call him an authoritarian. Those leading historians should read passages from numerous books on world events, especially in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. Read books about the atrocities that took place, the absolute unmitigated barbarism from despots and authoritarians, and compare that with Trump, who signed prison reform legislation, who will have a great economy, is the anti-war choice, who is the least likely to send Americans anywhere, the least likely ever to invade anywhere, compared to Democrats and the never-Trump Republicans like Dick Cheney, who voted Democrat. So Trump is the antithesis of an authoritarian. Now you have a complete changing of the guard where they'll say, oh, he's going after his direct political rivals. No, he's going after people who try to imprison him illegally. Very different. Understand that it's a very simple thing to understand, morally superior liberal Democrat. You try to imprison Trump based on lies, you very likely broke the law. Or I should say, government officials very likely broke the law, and if they did, then new government officials will indict and possibly, very likely, imprison them.
Maria, thanks so much for having me from Happy Valley.
So, Cash, connect the dots for us. You heard Devin talking about the Brookings Institute. I'll bring up the graphic of Durham's indictment of Danchenko. Talking about Danchenko working as an analyst at Washington-based bank think tank, which is the Brookings Institute, where he focused on Russia and Eurasian geopolitical matters. Tell me about the connection that Danchenko had in Brookings.
Yeah, that's a great starting point. And let's front load the conversation, Maria.
That I know.
Whose documentation was recovered by John Durham, thankfully, through his lawful and appropriate use of federal.
This criminal activity that would be the basis for further indictments. And, again, what happened with the Steele dossier, a grand jury is saying was criminal in nature. And I expect that all of the folks that are involved with creating it and peddling it falsely would be in jeopardy.
And that was former Director of National Intelligence John Ratcliffe with.
So, really quickly, you hear Kash Patel and John Ratcliffe and Pam Bondi, they're all going to team up. This is 3 years ago, but the issue with the Durham probe was that the Durham probe, John Durham was not given the ability or the authority by Trump's Department of Justice. You might say, well, it was never really Trump's Department of Justice. In Trump's first year, and it's not just President Trump, it's a lot of administrations. It takes at least 2 years. It takes at least 2 years, 2 to 3 years, for a president to completely have the administration loyal to his vision of the world, of politics, of domestic and foreign policy. So you had 8 years of Obama and 8 years of Bush prior to that. These are two sides of the same political coin. I voted for President Obama twice. I was a lifelong Democrat. I cried when he won. I thought that he would be completely different from George W. Bush. Okay, leader of all the never Trumpers, really, if you want to talk about, I mean, he's not vocal against Trump, but I mean, Jeb Bush, and I mean, the never Trumpers have had destroyed the Republican Party. The Democrats love the never Trumpers because they say, oh, we can defeat these never Trumpers very easily. We don't even have to have an actual candidate. We could have somebody that basically speaks in tongues and slurs speech, meanders off into the sunset, and they'll still win. Biden defeated Trump. That's also there's context there, but the point is you'd have a never Trumper defeat Nikki Haley 10 out of 10 times. With Trump, he defeated Clinton, he defeated Biden, Harris, he defeated Harris, who was really supposed to be Biden. But the point is, the George W. Bush Republicans, the Bush-Cheney-Rumsfeld Republicans, destroyed the Democratic Party, just like Biden, Harris, Clinton, and others destroyed the modern Democratic Party. You're going to have 4 years of Trump, 4 years of Vance. As long as we have a great economy, lower inflation, lower interest rates, Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk take care of waste in government. As long as we don't get into never-ending military entanglements and quagmires, because Trump is the anti-war choice, the moral imperative. All these good liberals who think that Trump's an authoritarian have no problem with endless military interventions and no problem with endless conflicts around the world. Started during Biden's administration. Okay. So as long as we have a much better foreign policy that's less militant and focuses on economic leverage, and as long as we have like tariffs that are short-term leverage, we have leverage now still, believe it or not, after 4 years of Biden and Harris. So the tariffs are actually really good things. They actually kept Trump's tariffs, a lot of Trump's tariffs and his tax cuts. But we have a new ball game, and everyone who set up Trump and framed Trump, as long as they're going to get indicted, very likely they'll face prison sentences because Kash Patel, John Radcliffe, Pam Bondi, and others, they're not playing anymore. They're not playing. Plus, if Americans have a good economy and Americans have a good foreign policy, which is what we didn't have with Biden, okay, Vance will go 4 years, possibly 8.
With me last week on this program on what he declassified, which of course exposed that this dossier and whole Russia collusion lie was a fabrication from Hillary Clinton. I am back with Kash Patel right now. And Kash, we mentioned Fiona Hill making all of these introductions to Christopher Steele as well as Charles Dolan. Meanwhile, she says she has no idea what they were doing. Here is a quote from her from a closed-door testimony from October of 2019 saying, I have no knowledge whatsoever of how he developed that dossier. None. I just want to state that. What are your thoughts on this? And give us your sense of the 3 indictments we've seen so far and where this is going.
Yeah, real quick on Fiona Hill. I think John Durham is on the case here because Fiona Hill has a credibility problem. I believe she lied to Congress there under oath. She connected the main Clinton political operative, who Devin and I had never heard of because DOJ and FBI withheld those documents from us intentionally, I believe so. And now John Durham has exposed that. She connects the Steele operation to the Democratic Party, and she has the gall to go on national TV or into closed-door testimony and say, I don't know what's going on with Steele. But John Durham's on that case, and I think we're going to get there. As to the 3 indictments that John Durham has issued, I believe he's built a sort of triangle of indictments, as I call them. At the top of the pyramid, you have Sussman, who represents an indictment of the Hillary Clinton campaign, the DNC, the law firm, and Fusion GPS, funneling tens of millions of dollars to perpetuate the biggest fraud in American history into the FBI. The bottom 2 pillars of the Durham triangle, I believe, are the FBI's, John Durham's indictment of the FBI attorney, which is literally an indictment of the FBI and now a criminal conviction for lying to a federal court to perpetuate a fraud and get a FISA warrant falsely. The last leg of the Durham triangle comes in the form of his recent indictment of Danchenko. Who's Danchenko and why does it matter? Danchenko is Steele's main source, introduced to Steele by Fiona Hill, who Steele relied on to write his dossier, in which he said Steele, received credible information from Danchenko. We now know Danchenko's a liar. We also know, because of the Durham investigation, Danchenko provided no credible information to Christopher Steele. So his credibility has been destroyed, and these merchants of menace are finally coming to light thanks to John Durham's great work. And he's got a long way to go. And I'm glad he's getting the the information that Rod Rosenstein and Chris Wray intentionally withheld from Chairman Nunes in our investigation during Russiagate probe.
Lee, thank you for the kind words. Paul Bartlett, thank you for the super chat as always, Paul. Can't thank you enough. And thank you, everybody, for the kind words and for watching. Kash Patel is the new... Imagine, like, everything that I've been saying for about 6-7 years, but now these people are top influential, like the head of the United States intel agent, the intel community. Remember, the Democrats they would always say the intel community says, and you'd think of like Brennan mowing his lawn and like Clapper, fixing his doing an oil change. Hi neighbor, it's intel community. This is now the intel community that all the wonderful, very respected liberal publications, Mother Jones, The Nation, New York Times, Washington Post, The Atlantic, Vanity Fair, Esquire, Vice, BuzzFeed that published the dossier that got out of defamation and libel suits because they said, well, it was the government. The government was doing it, so we just published complete a conspiratorial theory. It was the government. Now all of these publications will despise the same intel agencies that they worshipped. Again, this is so important, ladies and gentlemen, and hit subscribe to this channel. This is amazing. With Kash Patel, with Pam Bondi, with John Ratcliffe, you have a trifecta of just awesomeness. I can't even tell you. And then you have probably a new National Security Agency chief, very likely, or possibly, I'm not sure. Everything's going to be declassified. Do you understand that, ladies and gentlemen? They're going to unearth or allow the public to see all the information that was withheld. Any information that was withheld. The way the government works, it's the Democrats and people loyal to Democrats, the same outgoing or the same, loyalists that media claims were, impartial. The way they did things, which is why the Durham probe couldn't work, because Trump with William Barr didn't really have a Justice Department, especially not with Jeff Sessions, the worst attorney general of all time. The way the government works is the following. When Democrats and media and government officials converged to set up and frame Trump, to accuse Trump of being a Kremlin operative, you'd have to be a complete and utter fool, a complete imbecile to believe any of that. Any pundit telling you that Trump was working with the Kremlin, bleh, they were just basically AI robots that were just fed a script by the wonderful liberal intelligentsia. We have the most unintelligent, we have the greatest buffoons and most unintelligent intelligentsia of all time. But anyway, the way they did it was they utilized gossip and rumor and hearsay and conjecture, and they investigated based on intel that was really gossip. And so what John Brennan, when he was under oath, said, well, I don't do evidence, I do intelligence. So the evidence and intelligence are not the same thing. Kash Patel has evidence. He doesn't just have a dossier that says President Obama or Biden or Hunter or Hillary was doing this or that. He has people that will likely lied under oath. So when Kash Patel very likely indicts the new California senator or others, what he's going to do is he's going to say, look, here's a declassified, these are all the documents withheld, because what Democrats and media and government officials did was they either hid exculpatory evidence or they utilized quote-unquote intelligence that was merely gossip and hearsay. Government officials would feed debunked, completely false stories to journalists. Journalists would then write the stories. Then judges would then look at public record, because government attorneys would say, look, it's public record, it's public knowledge. There's been investigations claiming that Trump had this and that. It was all nonsense, but then the judges would greenlight the surveillance and the investigations based on information that was false, that was fed by government officials to journalists to print, which would then be used, like I said, by the judges and then, further the investigations. And then you just had just blatant lies testified under oath. The problem, however, with the Durham probe is that none of the information that could have really prosecuted people was ever declassified. So they were able to hide all the exculpatory evidence, all the evidence showing criminal activity and motive and intent to set up and frame Trump and everybody around him. That's how it happened. Like I said, you can read George Papadopoulos' book. Go ahead and read George Papadopoulos' book. It's on Amazon. I actually bought it the other night again. I read it years back. Okay, it's George Papadopoulos. His book is a very, very good, it's a very, it'll show you what true authoritarians can do to an honest citizen. Okay, it's on Amazon. Deep State Target: How I Got Caught in the Crosshairs of the Plot to Bring Down President Trump. Okay, it's on Amazon, and you could buy it. It's really good, and it explains what they did is they utilized the United States government to go after people based on hearsay and gossip. And there wasn't a shred of evidence. None of the things that they call evidence was utilized. It was all gossip, hearsay, innuendo, because Trump defeated Clinton. And they couldn't even stand it. These are the same people who don't go to Thanksgiving and Christmas because Trump won again with their family. So imagine that, but with political power.
So on the Kevin Clinesmith indictment, this is the FBI attorney. Does it end there, or are we going to see a road to others in the FBI perhaps getting arrested for directing Kevin Clinesmith? This is a young guy who obviously changed paperwork to say that Carter Page was not an asset of the CIA when in fact he was.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Look, I think all roads lead to Andy McCabe, the former deputy director of the FBI, who was caught lying 3 times by the inspector general during his tenure there. Kevin Clinesmith, the mid-level FBI attorney, cannot pull off the greatest political scandal in history alone. He needs direction from his supervisors. He's a convicted felon. He doctored a piece of paper for the FISA court. Now, I, as a former national security prosecutor who did FISAs, know how horrendous and how egregious that type of conduct is. But more importantly, I know that it cannot be done alone. It is virtually impossible to get that information to a federal judge for a secret surveillance warrant without the deputy director of the FBI knowing it. And I think all roads lead to Andy McCabe. His credibility is in question, not to mention that of Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, and Andy McCabe, who orchestrated the insurance policy to prevent Donald Trump from becoming president. That's their own text messages.
Real quick.
And by the way, a lot of these officials, not necessarily sure if it's the people he named, but a lot of these officials, guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Deleted and wiped clean their phones and servers and text messages and emails. And there were just updates that coincidentally, everything was gone. Well, those pesky Microsoft updates, oh well, suddenly we don't know the motive or intent or, all the things that they were doing to set up and frame Trump. Again, you'd have to be a complete imbecile to believe any of the nonsense that was reported. There have been thousands, probably tens of thousands of articles written about Trump and the Kremlin. And almost every single one of them was based on lies. You'd have to have zero functioning brain cells to believe any of this. But wonderful, morally superior Democrats, especially the ones that don't want to talk to you because you voted for Trump, because you wanted lower inflation. Oh my God, authoritarians want low inflation. These people reveled. They're Mueller time, and this is when Twitter was blue sky, basically. They're going to blue sky now, which is hilarious. Okay, because they used to have Twitter, they used to have the intel agencies. Now they have these new tech platforms. I'm not on Twitter. I'm not on Facebook. I'm not on Instagram. I just have H.A. Goodman and 2 other channels. Okay, I unfortunately still believe there's going to be a stock market crash, but I think Trump will get us out of it very quickly. But anyway, and I do think crypto is going to crash, but I think also Trump will help us get out of that quickly. But the point, ladies and gentlemen, is that you had an entire monstrosity that I had to swim upstream. We all had to swim upstream for 7-8 years. We had to listen to this nonsense. We had to listen to completely ridiculous, absurd nonsense. Trump, in the Kremlin, he's a Kremlin. And we heard that all we did was hear this nonsense. And now we're going to get, thank you, Lou, by the way, thank you to my super chat. We're going to get to the bottom of all of this. And it's not difficult. Okay, I wrote about a lot of this in the Federalist in 2019. Okay, you can type H.A. Goodman Federalist. But Kash Patel is absolutely brilliant. Okay, Vivek Ramaswamy, Kash Patel, Elon Musk, Tulsi Gabbard. Okay, you have Tulsi Gabbard in addition to as the ODNI chief. You have Kash Patel as FBI director. You have John Radcliffe at Central Intelligence. You have Pam Bondi at Department of Justice. This is like all, these are basically superheroes. These are Trump Republican superheroes that replaced the wonderful, morally superior, highly educated, liberal Democratic Party superheroes that did nothing but further complete McCarthy-era Red Scare absurd nonsense. It was just all nonsense. Every single article that you read about Trump and the Kremlin. But anyway, let's continue.
Real quick before you go, you took the deposition of Jake Sullivan. As I keep saying on this program and have for some time, those who abused power are now in power. Jake Sullivan was the communications person for Hillary Clinton, a manager for her. Now he is working for Joe Biden at the NSA. He said he put out a tweet and a post back in October of 2016. Listen to this. This could be the most direct link yet between Donald Trump and Moscow. Computer scientists have apparently uncovered a covert server linking the Trump.
That was all lies and nonsense. There was not a shred of evidence. In fact, it was basically a setup. And the problem was when the Durham probe prosecuted people linked to this. Actually, the Durham probe decided not to prosecute some of the prime individuals. Anyway, that's another story. John Durham's a very honorable, from what I understand, he's an honorable man and very good prosecutor, but he was not given the ability to truly prosecute because William Barr's Justice Department did not really, from what I understand, give him the ability to. Now you have Kash Patel, which will be 10 times what Durham was able to accomplish. 20 times, probably.
Trump Organization to the Russian-based bank. Here is his post that Hillary Clinton then tweeted out. Jake Sullivan was peddling and spreading the dossier.
He was, and he has the gall to come into Congress. And as you mentioned, I took so many of those depositions and say he had no idea, like Fiona Hill, how the dossier was created or who the $10 million Jake Sullivan and the DNC were paying was being utilized to collect foreign intelligence fraudulent information. So I think John Durham.
And those millions of dollars led to FEC fines, which Trump never got for any payment to Stormy, which, by the way, wasn't an FEC violation. We know this from Hanze von Spakovsky, former FEC chairman, Bradley Smith, and also Trey Traynor, all three former FEC chairmen. But again, if you're a morally superior, highly educated liberal Democrat who cares about morals, you just don't know any of this, so ignorance is bliss. And then you just, touch yourself in ecstasy while, not going to your family Thanksgiving or Christmas or New Year's dinner because you think you're morally superior. And part of the morally superior foundation is ignorance. Or lack of knowledge or lack of education on this specific topic. Nobody knows the three FEC chairmen that I mentioned on the left. Nobody cares. It's not even within the realm of knowledge that everything Kash Patel, or what I've been saying for 8 years, they don't even understand how Democrats and media set up and framed Trump and created the McCarthy-era Red Scare. But they're the ones who are the vanguards of morality.
On his case. And Maria, wouldn't it be the irony of all ironies for the current national security prosecutor to get charged with an actual felony based on real information and fact, and not have this Department of Justice withhold exculpatory evidence like they did to the former national security advisor under Donald Trump? I think that's the accountability that the American public so desperately need. And I think that's where this road is going and where John Durham's taking us. So stay tuned. I think we're only 60 to 70% of the way there.
All right, we'll keep watching that and talk with you along the way. Kash, thanks very much for joining us from beautiful Snow.
So this is 3 years ago. Also, Kash Patel, he sounds like me, right? Or I sound like him. He knows infinitely more than I do about, everything that's going on, because he has access to, things that nobody else does. But it wasn't difficult. Look, I've been swimming upstream. We all have. We've all been swimming upstream. We've all had to contend with complete nonsense for the past 8 years. But thank God Trump turned his head, and that poor man, God bless his soul, that firefighter lost his life. Where's the investigative journalism at the Washington Post or New York Times? Where are all the Pulitzer Prize winning investigative journalists trying to find out why that firefighter lost his life in the first attempt on Trump's life? But Trump turned his head, and now thank God. But, and I mean, look, you say thank God, it is, one life was spared and one life was taken that day. And it's interesting how no liberal journalist cares, yet they're all moral. They're all morally superior. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that wonderful how all the morally superior liberal Democrats don't care, don't want to investigate, don't even have any questions regarding the attempt on Trump's life that took the life of another man and took a father away from his family? But they're morally superior, don't you know? The Democrats, they're great people.
Welcome back. We are back with former prosecutor and former Pentagon Chief of Staff, Kash Patel. Kash, I want to know from you when you believe the FBI figured out that the lies were coming from the Clinton campaign. I know that in January 25th, 6th, and 7th, the FBI did meetings with the subsource on what exactly was in the dossier, and at that time they told them that it was garbage and they made it up. They had beers and embellished. But when do you believe the FBI figured out that all of this was just one political campaign trying to take down another?
I think they knew right away in the documents that we put out in the Nunes investigation, the Nunes memo, and the HPSI report on Russian active measures show that the FBI knew right away, because their FISA abuse process, now that declassification process is complete and your viewers can read it, that the FBI knew the information was fraudulent. They knew the credibility problems with Christopher Steele, and they knew the DNC through Fusion GPS and Perkins Coie were piping in tens of millions of dollars into the machine so that they could get up a FISA warrant on President Trump. So I think they knew right away.
Liquid smoke, yes.
Which is why I think the individuals at the head of the FBI need to be held accountable.
Wow. So they knew that it was garbage, and yet they still pursued a FISA warrant to wiretap Trump organization members like Carter Page. Will John Durham reel in any big fish, in your view?
Yeah, and I believe so. And let me just put this in perspective. When I was running large-scale conspiracy and fraud investigations, they took me 3, 4, 5 years to prosecute. John Durham's only in his second year of the most political scandal in U.S. history. So I believe within the next 6 months, look out for indictments against the folks like Fusion GPS and Glenn Simpson for helping perpetuate this fraud. And look out for individuals like Lisa Page and Peter Strzok. I believe they're already helping John Durham. They're cooperating with him to get the bigger fish like the Andy McCabe, who is the biggest fraudster next to James Comey. I think you're going to see these indictments start coming out on the individuals at the top. It's just.
So I was referring to the superior comment instead of morally superior. It was another word, superior. Anyway, Kash Patel is amazing. He's absolutely brilliant. If you're a morally superior, highly educated liberal Democrat, listen to what Kash Patel is saying. Try to wrap your overwhelming intellect around the words and his thought process. Why did these government officials text each other, work with each other to imprison Trump? What did Trump do other than defeat Clinton? There was not a shred of evidence. There was not even a shred of evidence. If you're a liberal Democrat or a progressive, don't you care that an innocent man was set up and framed? Because Harris actually did do that to an innocent man also. So, they make a big deal about Trump with an ad in a newspaper. Those were all liberal Democrats that convicted a number of people who were eventually found innocent. But he didn't convict anyone. It was actually Harris who convicted, and Democrats back in the 80s who convicted people who were innocent. But anyway, the point is, if you're so morally superior, you think Trump's an authoritarian, aren't you repulsed by a Red Scare McCarthy era world created by government officials to deceive the country? To accuse people like George Papadopoulos and Michael Flynn and Carter Page and Donald Trump of things they didn't do? Manafort Manafort, I believe, engaged in specific financial crimes, but most of the things that he's accused of, he didn't do. And they did the same types of financial, what do you want to call it, illegalities as the people he worked with who were Democrats. But they weren't charged. So, but most of the people were completely innocent. Why? You created a world, media, Democrats, and all the wonderful people at Hollywood, late night comedians, they were all part of this public relations monstrosity that furthered this McCarthy-era Red Scare that tried to link Trump to the Kremlin when we already learned in high school. If you're in your 40s, you learned early on that the McCarthy era was a terrible time. The House Un-American Activities Committee on Un-American Activities. And then the rebuttal is, well, there were communists. Okay, but not one of the top generals in U.S. history that was accused of wrongdoing. That was McCarthy went overboard. That was his undoing. And he created this panic, which is what Democrats did, 70 years later? 70 plus years later. It was the same thing, but if you're morally superior, highly educated, if you're one of these historians on ABC News, you have a very difficult time putting two and two together. Do you not? If you're a leading historian, okay, far more accomplished than I've ever been, how do you not see parallels between the McCarthy era and the Clinton dossier and everything going on, everything Kash Patel is saying? But again, this is too far. You'd have to remove yourself from your obsession with Trump to actually see things for what they are, which was that very likely you were duped by the same people you respected if you're a liberal Democrat.
A few more months, but I remind your viewers it takes a little bit of time to work these matters.
Unbelievable. And no surprise, the mainstream media gave them all jobs. All right, quick move on to Afghanistan. What really is getting me is the
and former Deputy Director of National Intelligence and former Department of Defense Chief of Staff Kash Patel. Kash, your reaction to just the president's remarks, and he was, quite frankly, very reserved, given what has gone on today.
I think it's great to be with you guys. I think he showed extreme composure at a time when any other American would have completely lost it. And I think that shows the brilliance of President Trump's ability to put the two-tier system of justice on display for all Americans to see in civil and criminal proceedings in state and federal court. And look, as a former federal prosecutor and a public defender, an individual who actually prosecuted and defended fraud cases, let's just lay this out as simple as we can. In order for there to be a fraud case, there has to be a fraud victim who was defrauded. And in this instance, as the president highlighted, this judge convicted him before the trial even began of this fraud and then made up monetary numbers to substantiate that judgment. On top of which, the president was denied a right to a jury trial because Letitia James used some statute for consumer protection fraud issues to prosecute Trump civilly that precluded him from a jury trial of his peers. So there are all sorts of constitutional issues with this, but what the American public has seen is a rigged system of justice against a political opponent of the DOJ and the state attorney general's office in New York.
So, Angie, thank you. Paul Bartlett, thank you. Everybody here, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is absolutely fantastic news. This is going to be a very amusing and enjoyable 4 years. God bless America. And I've been saying God bless America all throughout Biden's administration and obviously Trump's first term. And I mean that. But I'll say that you tried to, at the end of the day, you tried to set up and frame Donald Trump with very deceitful, very corrupt, and sloppy, very sloppy government officials and others. Now you have Kash Patel, Tulsi Gabbard, John Radcliffe, Pam Bondi. If you broke the law, if a person broke the law trying to lie and accuse Trump of something he didn't do, you could say you didn't know. Oh my God. If there's evidence that people did so deliberately, they'll very likely have a jail or prison sentence. Anyway, hit subscribe. This is huge, people. If you've watched this channel for 7+ years, there was a phrase from years back, the indictments are imminent. So that was such a different time in American politics. The indictments actually really are imminent because you have people who are intent on upholding the rule of law. There was no rule of law when they went after Trump in a state or federal, on the state or federal level. They wanted to go after him and set him up and frame him, and everybody knew that. Now, if you broke the law trying to set up and frame Trump, you're going to get indicted. Hit subscribe, people. See you tomorrow. God bless you all. Stay safe. Thank you very, very much, everybody. Tell your friends about this